Okay, let's talk about the horrible OP input path. It's a very important expression and you will need it quite a lot of time. This is why it deserves its own video. You mostly need it for older nodes because the newer nodes all have this kind of functionality where you can choose the context geometry or the input or whatever it's called, where it automatically chooses from your DOP network the input. But sometimes you want to have the input of a node without having this kind of function. For example, the static object has that problem because it is a pretty old node. And sometimes you want to have actually an input from a node that is not in any way connected directly to this network, but from somewhere else. So it's quite an important and helpful expression. So it's called Opinputpath, which is an expression which actually means it's H script. And sometimes you still need that. And whenever you have a function like that, you need brackets. And it does what it says. It takes an operator, a node, and gives back the input path. So the path of the node that goes in. The way it works, it has two inputs. The first one is where you want to read the input from. So you could actually put in here a full path. Let's say obj geo1 and the name of our DOP network, which is DOPNet1. So that would totally work. But since we want this guy here to read out the input of its parent node, which is the same thing, you can also just do this, and we will do this quite a lot. You just do two dots, which just means, you know what, give me the input of my parent node. And then the second input is the actual input. And this, interestingly enough, it doesn't start with 1. So if I want to read out, in this case, I might want to read out the second input of my DOPNet here, then I would actually put in 1. And this is very important to remember. It starts counting with 0. And this is actually something that comes from programming. So keep that in mind because you will need it a couple of times later, for example, in VEX, where programming languages usually start counting at 0, which can be very confusing. So in other words, the first input is 0, the second input is 1, the third input is 2, and so on. This can be very confusing, but just keep it in mind. Now that I've done this, it doesn't work. It gives me an error. And the reason for this is, and this is usually the case when you use that, whenever you use Opinputpath, you usually use it on a string parameter. So this subpath here actually expects a path. So I could do something like, okay, obj, geo1, and then some input like our merge here. So this is what the subpath expects, and this is why it all of a sudden works. So in other words, this parameter looks for a string that defines a path. Now, if we give him an expression, this is a computer. He doesn't understand that this is not a path. All he realizes, oh, this is a path that doesn't exist. Problem. To tell the machine that this is actually an expression and not a path, we use the back quotes. That's the one next to your 1. So the key next to the key 1, and they look like this. And as soon as you do that, he understands, oh, this is not a path, this is an expression, so I have to kind of calculate this, I have to kind of run this. And besides the fact that I can see that it actually worked, a good idea is to middle click on the parameter, and then you can see basically the evaluated version of your HScript expression that gives you back what the expression gives back. And this is always a good way of checking if everything worked. So middle click on the parameter. Yeah, and this is Opinputpath. We will use that quite a lot, even though it's a bit annoying, but trust me, if you've done it a couple of times, it's very easy to remember. All right, so I hope this was helpful. See you later. Cheers.